A truck so weathered, so beaten by time and circumstance, that it seemed held together by nothing but prayer and rust. And the man who stepped out of it, the man in the faded blue janitor's uniform with the name Daniel stitched above the pocket, had no idea that this ordinary rainy night was about to change both their lives forever. But here's what nobody could have predicted. What happened the next morning would leave an entire town speechless and force everyone to reconsider everything they thought they knew about kindness, fate, and the extraordinary power of a single good deed. Marcus straightened his uniform as the electronic chime announced the customer's entrance. He'd learned long ago to read people the moment they walked through that door, the hurried businessmen who paid with platinum cards without making eye contact, the teenagers who tried to distract him while their friends pocketed energy drinks, the exhausted mothers counting coins for formula. But this man, this Daniel, walked in with something Marcus rarely saw anymore, the particular heaviness of someone carrying an invisible mountain on his shoulders. Daniel's work boots left wet prints on the linoleum floor. His hair was graying at the temples, though his face suggested he couldn't be older than 42. Life had a way of aging people faster than calendars could measure, and this man had clearly lived several lifetimes worth of struggle. "Pump 3, Daniel said quietly, approaching the counter. His voice cracked slightly, betraying an exhaustion that went far deeper than physical fatigue. I need to check how much." Marcus watched as the man fumbled through his wallet, a wallet so thin it was practically see-through. He pulled out bills, counting them once, twice, 3 times, as if hoping the number might magically increase. His hands trembled slightly, and Marcus noticed the calluses on his palms, the kind that came from years of hard labor, from gripping mop handles and pushing heavy equipment. $7.43, Daniel whispered, more to himself than to Marcus. He looked up at the display behind the counter, where gas prices glowed in harsh, red numbers. The math was cruel and simple. $7 wouldn't get him far, maybe 15 miles if he drove carefully. But there was something else in Daniel's eyes, something that made Marcus's chest tighten. It was fear, pure undisguised fear. Not for himself, Marcus could tell, but for someone else. "That should get you a bit down the road," Marcus offered, trying to keep his voice neutral. Daniel nodded but didn't move toward the register. Instead, he stared at his worn boots, and his shoulders began to shake, almost imperceptibly at first, then more noticeably. "Sir, are you all right?" Daniel looked up, and Marcus saw tears forming in the corners of his eyes. The man quickly wiped them away, embarrassed by this display of vulnerability in front of a stranger. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I don't usually... He took a deep breath, struggling to compose himself. "My daughter, Emma. She's 8 years old, and she's at home right now with a 103-degree fever. I just finished my shift at the hospital. I cleaned the floors there, 3rd shift. And I need to get her medicine, but the 24-hour pharmacy is 20 miles away. And He gestured helplessly at the crumpled bills in his hand. "I spent my last $40 on her birthday present yesterday. It was supposed to be a surprise, a bike, her first real bike. I'd been saving for months, and I didn't expect I didn't know she'd get sick tonight." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He understood struggle. He understood the mathematics of poverty, how one unexpected expense could send an entire careful budget into catastrophic collapse. He understood because he'd been there himself, more times than he cared to remember. "Where's her mother?" Marcus asked gently, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Daniel's face contorted with pain that had nothing to do with tonight. "Cancer," he said simply. 3 years ago. It was quick. Too quick, really. One day she was complaining about feeling tired, and 4 months later... He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marcus looked at the clock. His manager, Howard, had left at 10. There were no cameras pointing at the register. The owner was too cheap to fix the broken one that had stopped working months ago. And in that moment, standing across the counter from this broken man, Marcus made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. "Fill it up," Marcus said. Daniel blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Fill your tank up all the way. I can't. I only have 7. "I heard you the first time." Marcus reached into his own pocket and pulled out the $60 he'd been saving, the money he'd been putting aside for 3 months to buy his mother a new pair of winter gloves for Christmas. Without hesitation, he laid the bills on the counter. "Fill it up, get to the pharmacy, get your daughter's medicine, and if you have anything left over, get her some soup, the chicken noodle kind. My grandmother always said it works magic on sick kids." Daniel stared at the money, then at Marcus, then back at the money. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Finally, his legs seemed to give way slightly, and he gripped the counter for support. "Why?" he managed to whisper. "You don't even know me." Marcus shrugged, though his heart was pounding. "I know enough. I know you're a father who works the night shift cleaning hospital floors so you can be home during the day for your little girl. I know you spent your last money on making her smile. And I know that if our positions were reversed, if it was my kid sick at home—" He trailed off, swallowing hard. "Just go. Go take care of Emma." Daniel reached for the money with shaking hands. He tried to speak, to offer some words of gratitude, but his throat had closed completely. All he could do was nod, a deep, reverent nod that conveyed more thanks than any words ever could. "I'll pay you back," Daniel finally managed. "I swear to God I'll pay you back," Marcus waved him off. "Don't worry about it, really. Just take care of your daughter." Daniel clutched the bills like they were made of gold. He started toward the door, then stopped, turning back one final time. "What's your name?" he asked. "Marcus Thompson." Daniel seemed to engrave the name into his memory. "Marcus Thompson," he repeated. "I won't forget this. I won't forget you." And with that, he disappeared into the rain. Marcus watched the old pickup truck pull up to pump 3. He watched Daniel fill the tank, really fill it, all the way to the top, something the man probably hadn't done in years. He watched the truck's taillights disappear into the wet darkness, carrying a father toward medicine for his sick child, and Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time: purpose. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. He helped a few more customers, restocked the cigarette display, mopped up the muddy footprints near the entrance. But his mind kept returning to Daniel, to the look in his eyes when he'd received that small act of kindness. There had been something there, something beyond mere gratitude. It was as if Marcus had given him more than money. He'd given him a reason to believe that goodness still existed in the world. By the time dawn began to paint the sky in shades of gray and gold, Marcus was exhausted. His relief, a college kid named Tyler, showed up 15 minutes late, as usual, and Marcus handed over the register with minimal conversation. He walked out to his car, a 12-year-old Honda, with more problems than he could afford to fix, and drove home through streets that were just beginning to wake. His mother was asleep when he arrived at their small apartment. She'd left a plate of food in the refrigerator for him, covered in plastic wrap, with a note that read, "Proud of you. Love, Mom." He ate silently in the dim kitchen, too tired to taste anything, too wired to sleep. When he finally did drift off sometime around 7 in the morning, his last thought was of Emma, a little girl he'd never met, fighting a fever alone while her father raced through the rain to save her. The next day, Marcus arrived at work at his usual time, 3 in the afternoon, ready for another 8-hour shift. The sky was clear now, the previous night's storm, nothing but a memory reflected in scattered puddles. He clocked in, tied on his apron, and took his position behind the counter, expecting nothing more than another ordinary day of ordinary transactions. He was wrong. At exactly 4:30, a black sedan pulled into the station. It was the kind of car Marcus had only seen in movies, sleek, expensive, with tinted windows that revealed nothing of its occupants. It parked not at the pumps, but directly in front of the entrance, in the spot reserved for customers making quick purchases. 2 figures emerged, The first was Daniel, but it took Marcus a moment to recognize him. Gone was the faded janitor's uniform, the beaten work boots, the hunched posture of a man carrying invisible weights. In its place was the same man, but transformed. He wore clean clothes, not expensive, but pressed and neat, and he walked with his head held high, his shoulders back, his eyes bright with a purpose that hadn't been there before. The second figure made Marcus's heart skip a beat. It was a woman in a tailored gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Her hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes, behind wire-rimmed glasses, were sharp and calculating. Everything about her screamed lawyer, but not the kind who handled small claims or traffic tickets. This was someone who dealt in fortunes. Marcus felt his palms begin to sweat. His mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Had Daniel reported him? Had he somehow gotten in trouble for giving away money that wasn't technically his? Was he about to be arrested for theft? The electronic chime announced their entrance. Daniel walked directly to the counter, his eyes finding Marcus immediately. The woman followed 2 steps behind, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. "Marcus Thompson," Daniel said, and his voice was steady now, strong in a way it hadn't been the night before. "Daniel." Marcus tried to keep his voice even. "How's your daughter? How's Emma?" A smile spread across Daniel's face, the first smile Marcus had seen him wear. "She's better." The fever broke around 4 in the morning. "The medicine worked." He paused, his eyes glistening. "You saved her life, Marcus. You saved my daughter's life." "I just gave you some money for gas," Marcus protested weakly. "You gave me hope," Daniel corrected. "You gave me hope when I had none left, and that's something you can't put a price on." He turned slightly, gesturing to the woman beside him. "This is Victoria Ashworth. She's a lawyer." Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. "A lawyer?" Victoria stepped forward, extending her hand with professional precision. "Mr. Thompson, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Daniel has told me quite a lot about you." "I don't understand," Marcus said, shaking her hand mechanically. "What's going on?" Daniel and Victoria exchanged a look that contained entire conversations Marcus couldn't decipher. Then Daniel took a deep breath and began to speak. "Marcus, I need to tell you a story. It's a story I don't share often because for most of my life I've tried to forget it. But after what you did for me last night, I think you deserve to know the truth." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My real name isn't Daniel Cooper. It's Daniel Harrison Whitmore, and until I was 23 years old, I was heir to the Whitmore fortune." Marcus blinked. The Whitmore name was known throughout the state. They owned half the commercial real estate downtown, had buildings named after them at the university, donated millions to hospitals and charities. The Whitmore family was practically royalty in this part of the country. "I don't—" "What?" Marcus stammered. Daniel continued, his voice heavy with decades of accumulated pain. "My father was Charles Whitmore. You might have heard of him. He was in all the papers when he died about 6 years ago. What the papers didn't mention was what happened 20 years before that, when he decided to disown his only son." He moved to one of the small tables near the window, and Victoria gestured for Marcus to follow. They sat, Daniel and Marcus across from each other, Victoria slightly to the side, observing with keen legal eyes. "I grew up in a mansion," Daniel explained. "I went to the best schools, wore the finest clothes, had everything a child could ever want. But the one thing I wanted most, my father's love, was always conditional. It came with expectations, with demands. I was supposed to be a certain kind of person, you see. I was supposed to marry well, to take over the family business, to carry on the Whitmore legacy." "What happened?" Marcus asked, drawn into the story despite his confusion. "I fell in love." A sad smile crossed Daniel's face. "Her name was Sarah, and she was the most beautiful person I'd ever known, not just physically, but in her soul. She was kind and genuine, and she didn't care about money or status or any of the things my family valued. She was a kindergarten teacher. She came from nothing, and she was everything to me." Marcus thought of his own mother, who had scrubbed toilets in rich people's houses to keep food on their table. He thought of every person who'd ever looked down on him for working at a gas station. Your father didn't approve. That's an understatement. Daniel's voice hardened. He called her trash. He called her a gold digger. He told me that if I married her, I would be dead to him, that I would be erased from his will, from the family, from everything I had ever known. And you married her anyway? The next week. Daniel's eyes softened with the memory. We got married in a courthouse with 2 strangers as witnesses. We moved into a tiny apartment above a laundromat. I got a job cleaning offices at night because it was the only work I could find. I had a degree in business, but my father made sure every door in the city was closed to me. And you know what? Those first few years were the happiest of my life. Victoria cleared her throat gently. Mr. Thompson, I should explain that I've been the Whitmore family's estate attorney for 15 years. I've seen the documents, the wills, the amendments. Everything Daniel is telling you is accurate. Daniel nodded his thanks to her. When Emma was born, I thought my heart would burst with joy. This perfect little girl, with Sarah's eyes and my stubborn chin. We had nothing, but we had everything that mattered. We had each other. His voice caught, and Marcus saw the pain resurface. Then Sarah got sick, and I learned that all the love in the world can't protect you from some things. We couldn't afford the treatments she needed, the good treatments, the ones that might have actually saved her. By the time I swallowed my pride and went to my father for help, it was too late. He refused to see me. He had his security escort me off the property. My God, Marcus whispered. Sarah died believing she was loved, Daniel continued. That's the only comfort I have. She never knew that I had begged my own father for help and been turned away. She never knew how close I came to giving up completely after she was gone. He paused, wiping his eyes. After the funeral, I took Emma and I just kept going, not for myself. I had nothing left to live for, but for her. She needed me. She was all I had left of Sarah. So I cleaned hospital floors, and I mopped up other people's messes, and I scraped together just enough to keep us fed and housed. It wasn't a life. It was survival. Marcus thought about his own mother, about the sacrifices she'd made, about all the invisible people who kept the world running while receiving none of its rewards. You're a hero, he said quietly. Daniel shook his head. I'm a father, that's all. Any parent would do the same. Victoria opened her briefcase, extracting a thick folder of documents. Mr. Thompson, there's something you need to understand about the timeline here. Charles Whitmore died 6 years ago. His will was very specific. Daniel was explicitly disinherited, every penny going to various charities and distant relatives. However, she slid a document across the table. 3 weeks ago, during a routine audit of the estate, we discovered a second will, a will that Charles Whitmore signed on his deathbed, apparently in a moment of clarity, or perhaps guilt. A will that supersedes the previous one. Marcus stared at the document without comprehending. What does it say? It says, Victoria answered carefully, that Charles Whitmore left everything, every building, every investment, every dollar, to his son Daniel, with one condition. Daniel picked up the narrative. The condition was this: the inheritance would only be released if and when Daniel Harrison Whitmore performed an act of genuine kindness for a stranger in need, witnessed and verified by an independent party. My father, in his twisted way, believed that I had abandoned the family for selfish reasons. He thought I'd run off with Sarah because I wanted to escape responsibility. This condition was his final test, his way of determining whether I was worthy of the Whitmore name. The thing is, Victoria added, for this condition to be fulfilled, the act of kindness couldn't be something Daniel initiated. It had to be something he received. The will is quite specific. Charles wanted to ensure that Daniel had reached a point of genuine need and that someone had shown him compassion. Only then would the inheritance be released. Marcus felt the room spinning. Wait, are you saying— Daniel leaned forward, his eyes bright. I'm saying that when you gave me that money last night, when you gave a complete stranger $60 so he could buy medicine for his sick daughter, you didn't just help me. You fulfilled the condition of my father's will. You triggered an inheritance worth approximately $473 million. The number hung in the air, impossible and absolute. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't know about the second will, Daniel continued quickly. I had no idea. When Victoria called me this morning to tell me about it, I thought she was joking. But then she explained the condition, and I told her about what happened last night, and— He spread his hands helplessly. Here we are. Victoria pushed another document across the table. Mr. Thompson, there's more. The will contains a provision that whoever fulfilled the condition, whoever showed Daniel the kindness that released the inheritance, would receive 10% of the total estate as a reward. Marcus's vision actually went dark for a moment. He gripped the edge of the table, certain he was about to faint. That's approximately $47 million, Victoria clarified, as if the number needed to be spoken aloud to become real. After taxes, it would come to roughly $31 million. This has to be a joke, Marcus heard himself say. This is some kind of hidden camera thing, right? Where are the cameras? Daniel reached across the table and gripped Marcus's hand. It's not a joke. I spent all morning with Victoria, going through the documents, verifying everything. It's real, Marcus. It's all real. But I didn't do it for money, Marcus protested. I did it because you're a good person. Daniel's grip tightened. That's exactly the point. That's what my father could never understand. He thought kindness was always transactional, that everyone had an angle. He spent his whole life trusting no one, and in the end, it cost him everything that mattered. But you proved him wrong. You showed kindness without expecting anything in return. And in doing so, you've earned something more valuable than money. You've given me my life back. Marcus struggled to process the enormity of what he was hearing. His mind kept returning to the moment of decision, standing behind that counter with the rain hammering outside and a broken man before him. He'd given away his mother's Christmas present. He'd risked his job. He'd done what felt right, nothing more and nothing less. What happens now? He managed to ask. Victoria pulled out more papers. There's a significant amount of paperwork, of course. The estate has been in probate for years, and releasing it will require court approval, documentation of the triggering event, and various other legal procedures. However, I can tell you that the inheritance is legitimate, the second will is valid, and barring any unforeseen complications, both Daniel and you, Mr. Thompson, will receive your designated amounts within the next 90 days. This is insane, Marcus whispered. Daniel laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from a place of genuine joy. You're telling me. Yesterday I was a janitor who couldn't afford gas. Today I'm a millionaire. And it's all because you chose to be kind. Marcus thought about his mother, about her worn hands and tired eyes, about the winter gloves she wouldn't be getting this Christmas. Then he thought about what $31 million could mean, not just for him, but for her, for everyone he loved. There's something else, Daniel said, his voice growing serious again. The money is wonderful, but it's not what matters most to me. What matters is Emma. What matters is giving her the life she deserves, and that's something I want you to be part of. Me? You saved my daughter's life, Marcus. You gave me the means to get her medicine when I had nothing. Do you have any idea what that means to a father? Daniel's eyes glistened. I want you to be part of our lives. Not because of the money. Forget the money. I want you to know Emma. I want her to know the man who helped her when she was sick and scared. I want her to grow up understanding that there are good people in this world, people who help strangers for no reason other than because it's right. Marcus felt tears forming in his own eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll come meet her. Say you'll let us be your friends. The word struck Marcus with unexpected force. Friends. When was the last time he'd had a real friend? His job kept him isolated, working nights while the rest of the world slept. His poverty kept him marginalized, always on the outside looking in. And now here was this man, this formerly wealthy, then destitute, now wealthy again man, offering him something that money couldn't buy. Yes, Marcus heard himself say. Yes, of course. Daniel's face broke into a smile so wide it seemed to illuminate the entire gas station. He stood, and Marcus stood, and they embraced, two men from different worlds, brought together by a single moment of compassion. Victoria began organizing her papers, professional to the last. I'll be in touch with you both this week to begin the formal process. Mr. Thompson, I'll need some documents from you, identification, bank information, that sort of thing. Mr. Whitmore, we have a significant amount of work ahead of us, but I want you to know that it's going to be all right. Your father may have made your life difficult, but in the end, he tried to make it right. Too little, too late, Daniel murmured, but there was no bitterness in his voice anymore. Still, I suppose I should be grateful for whatever he managed. As they were preparing to leave, the door chimed again. Marcus's manager, Howard, walked in, looking annoyed at the presence of these well-dressed strangers. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with a perpetually sour expression of someone who believed the world owed him more than it had delivered. Thompson, what's going on here? Who are these people? Daniel turned, and something in his eyes changed. The warmth that had been there moments ago cooled into something harder, more calculating. You're the manager here? He asked. That's right, Howard Pike. And you are? I'm Daniel Whitmore. He let the name hang in the air. Yes, those Whitmores. And I'm here because this young man, he gestured to Marcus, did something extraordinary last night, something that changed my life. Howard's face went through several rapid transformations, confusion, skepticism, then a calculating sort of interest. Thompson's always been a good worker, he said, his tone suddenly obsequious. One of our best, really. We value him highly here. Marcus nearly laughed out loud. Just last week, Howard had threatened to dock his pay for taking a bathroom break that went 2 minutes over the allotted time. The man had never said a kind word about him in the 3 years Marcus had worked there. Daniel wasn't fooled either. His eyes narrowed slightly. Is that so? Then I'm sure you won't mind when I tell you that Marcus will be leaving your employment. Today? Leaving? Howard spluttered. He can't just leave. He has a shift. I think you'll find that he can, Victoria interjected smoothly, stepping forward with authority. And if you attempt to withhold any of his earned wages or cause any difficulties, you'll find that the Whitmore family has significant resources to devote to legal matters. Even small ones. Howard's face went pale. Now, there's no need for anything like that. If Thompson wants to leave, well, that's his choice, isn't it? No hard feelings. Marcus untied his apron slowly, savoring the moment. How many times had Howard humiliated him in front of customers? How many times had he been forced to smile through gritted teeth while his manager berated him for imagined failures? And now, with a twist of fate that still didn't seem real, it was over. I'll pick up my last check next week, Marcus said, and I'll expect every penny I'm owed. Of course, Howard agreed hastily. Whatever you say, Thompson. Marcus, Mr. Thompson. Daniel clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Come on, friend. Let's get out of here. There's someone I want you to meet. They walked out of the gas station together, Marcus, Daniel, and Victoria, leaving a very confused and frightened Howard Pike behind. The afternoon sun was warm, the air fresh with the memory of rain, and Marcus felt like he was walking into a new life. Where are we going? He asked. My apartment, Daniel said. It's not much, just a small place in the East End, but Emma's there with my neighbor keeping an eye on her. I want you to meet her while she's still too young to understand about the money. I want her to know you for who you are, not for what you're giving us. They drove in Daniel's old pickup, Marcus insisted, saying it felt right, while Victoria followed in her sedan. The neighborhood they entered was indeed modest, a collection of weather department buildings and small houses that had seen better days. But there was life here. Children playing on the sidewalks, elderly people sitting on porches, the smell of cooking food drifting from open windows. Daniel's apartment was on the second floor of a brick building that must have been beautiful once, decades ago. He led Marcus up a narrow stairway, past walls with peeling paint and doors with multiple locks, until they reached number 204. "Ready?" Daniel asked. Marcus nodded, though his heart was racing. He didn't know why he was so nervous. She was just a child, after all. But somehow, this felt like the most important moment of the entire day. Daniel knocked twice, then opened the door with his key. The apartment was small, but immaculately clean. Every surface gleamed, every item was in its place. There were crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, a collection of library books stacked neatly on a shelf, and on the worn but comfortable-looking couch sat a woman in her 60s with kind eyes. The neighbor, presumably, and a little girl. Emma. She looked up when they entered, and Marcus saw her mother in her face immediately, the high cheekbones, the intelligent eyes, the curious tilt of her head. Her brown hair was pulled back in slightly uneven pigtails, and she was wearing pajamas covered in images of cartoon dinosaurs. A thin sheen of sweat still clung to her forehead, evidence of the fever that had only recently broken. "Daddy!" she cried, jumping off the couch and running to Daniel with arms outstretched. He swept her up, holding her close, breathing her in like she was oxygen. "Hey, baby girl, how are you feeling?" "Better," she announced. "Mrs. Patterson let me have popsicles." The neighbor, Mrs. Patterson apparently, stood with a smile. "She's been a perfect angel. Temperatures stayed down all day." "Thank you so much," Daniel said sincerely. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Nonsense, that's what neighbors are for." Mrs. Patterson gathered her things, nodding politely to Marcus and Victoria as she made her way out. "You take care now, and Emma, you keep getting better, you hear?" "I will," Emma called after her. When the door closed, Emma's attention turned to Marcus. She studied him with the unabashed curiosity that only children possess, her head tilted to one side. "Who are you?" she asked directly. Daniel laughed, setting her down. "Emma, this is my new friend Marcus. He's the one who helped me get your medicine last night." Emma's eyes widened. She walked toward Marcus slowly, stopping just in front of him. He knelt down, bringing himself to her level, suddenly more nervous than he'd been in any job interview. "You helped my daddy?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "I tried to." "Why?" The question was simple, but it carried the weight of the universe. Why? Why did people help each other? Why did some people choose kindness when others chose cruelty? Marcus thought about it carefully before answering. "Because that's what we're supposed to do," he said finally. "When someone needs help and we can give it, we should. It's what makes us human." Emma considered this with the solemnity of a judge weighing evidence. Then, apparently satisfied, she nodded decisively and threw her arms around Marcus's neck. "Thank you," she whispered. "Daddy was really scared last night. I could tell, even though he pretended not to be." Marcus hugged her back, and something cracked open inside his chest, something he'd kept tightly locked away for years. When was the last time he'd been hugged? When was the last time someone had expressed genuine, uncomplicated gratitude? "You're welcome," he managed, his voice thick. They spent the rest of the afternoon together in that small apartment. Daniel made coffee, the cheap kind, but it tasted like the finest brew Marcus had ever had, while Emma showed Marcus her collection of library books and the drawings she'd made for her classroom. Victoria excused herself to make phone calls, but even she seemed charmed by the little girl's enthusiasm. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink visible through the small window, Daniel sat down across from Marcus with a serious expression. "There's something else I need to tell you," he said, "something I've been thinking about ever since Victoria called me this morning." Marcus waited. "When I get this money, this fortune I never expected to have, I could do anything with it. I could buy a mansion, travel the world, live in luxury for the rest of my life. Daniel shook his head. But that's not who I am anymore. That's not who Sarah taught me to be. He leaned forward. I've seen how the other half lives, Marcus. I've seen rich people stepping over homeless men on their way to fancy restaurants. I've seen them complain about tiny inconveniences while workers like us scrub their toilets and serve their meals. And now I've seen something else. I've seen a gas station attendant give away his own money to help a stranger. I've seen what kindness really looks like. What are you saying? Marcus asked. I'm saying that I want to use this money to make a difference, real difference. I want to create something, a foundation maybe, or a program that helps people like us. People who work hard every day and still can't make ends meet. People who are one flat tire, one medical bill, one emergency away from catastrophe. Emma had climbed onto the couch beside her father, leaning against him sleepily. Daniel put his arm around her and continued, I want you to help me, Marcus, not just because of the money you're going to receive, but because you understand. You've lived it. You know what it's like to be invisible, to be overlooked, to be dismissed as unimportant, and you chose to be kind anyway. Marcus thought about his mother, about all the years she'd sacrificed for him. He thought about his co-workers at the gas station, many of whom were single parents like Daniel, struggling to survive on minimum wage. He thought about the vast ocean of suffering in the world and the small drops of kindness that sometimes made it bearable. What did you have in mind? He asked. Daniel smiled. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I know it has to start with the basics, the things that are hardest to afford when you're barely getting by. Medicine, transportation, food, maybe even education eventually. Things that give people a fighting chance. The Kindness Fund, Marcus suggested, the words coming before he'd fully thought them through. Daniel's eyes lit up. The Kindness Fund. I like that. I like that a lot. They talked long into the evening, outlining ideas, dreaming bigger than either of them had dared to dream in years. Victoria eventually joined them, offering legal and financial guidance, her professional demeanor gradually softening as she saw what was taking shape. At some point, Mrs. Patterson returned with a pot of homemade soup, claiming she'd made too much and didn't want it to go to waste. They all shared it together, sitting around the tiny kitchen table. And Marcus realized that he felt something he hadn't experienced in as long as he could remember. He felt like he belonged. When he finally left that night, promising to return the next day, Marcus drove home through streets that looked somehow different. The run-down buildings seemed less oppressive. The tired faces of late-night workers seemed more human. Everything was the same, and yet everything had changed. His mother was awake when he got home, watching television with the volume turned low. She looked up as he entered, and her face immediately registered concern. "Marcus, baby, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." He sat down beside her, taking her weathered hand in his. How did he even begin to explain what had happened? How did he tell her that their lives were about to change forever, all because he'd done what she had always taught him to do, be kind to others? "Mom," he said slowly, "something happened tonight, something incredible." And he told her everything. By the time he finished, his mother was crying, not from sadness, but from a joy so profound it had nowhere to go but out through her tears. She held him tight, the way she had when he was a small boy afraid of thunderstorms, and she whispered words he would never forget. "I always knew," she said, "I always knew you were special, not because of what you'd achieve, but because of who you are. My kind, good, beautiful boy." That night Marcus lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling of his small room. In a few months he would be able to buy his mother the house she'd always dreamed of, a real house with a garden and a porch and enough rooms for guests. He would be able to pay off every debt, every bill, every weight that had pressed down on them for so long. But more than that, he would be able to help others the way he'd helped Daniel. The Kindness Fund wouldn't just be a nice idea, it would be a reality. People like him, people who worked impossible hours for insufficient pay, people who were one crisis away from collapse, they would have somewhere to turn, all because of $60 and a choice. 3 months later, the legal proceedings were complete. The Whitmore estate was released, the inheritance distributed, and Marcus Thompson found himself in possession of more money than he had ever imagined possible. But true to his word, he didn't buy mansions or sports cars. He didn't retreat into a bubble of luxury. Instead, he and Daniel launched the Kindness Fund together, starting in their own city and quickly expanding outward. They set up programs to help struggling families pay for emergency expenses, gas for job interviews, medicine for sick children, repairs for cars that were their owners' only means of getting to work. They partnered with local businesses to provide job training and interview clothes. They created scholarships for single parents who wanted to further their education. And at the center of it all was a simple philosophy: kindness without conditions. No means tests, no invasive questions, no hoops to jump through. Just help, offered freely to those who needed it. The first recipient of the Kindness Fund's official assistance was a young mother named Angela, who had walked into their office in tears because her car had died and she was about to lose her job. Marcus listened to her story, so similar to hundreds of stories he'd heard before. And he thought about that rainy night at the gas station, about Daniel standing at his counter with $7 in his pocket and a sick daughter at home. "We're going to help you," he told Angela, "and someday when you're able, maybe you'll help someone else." She stared at him as though he was speaking a foreign language. "Just like that? You're going to help me just like that?" Marcus smiled. "Just like that. That's how it works." Daniel became a regular presence at the fund's headquarters, often bringing Emma along after school. The little girl had recovered completely from her fever and had developed a fascination with the work her father and his friend were doing. She would draw pictures for the fund's clients, hand-delivering them with the solemn importance of a diplomat presenting credentials. "This is for you," she would say, "because my daddy says everyone deserves to feel special." The fund grew beyond anything Marcus or Daniel had anticipated. Local newspapers ran stories about it, then regional outlets, then national ones. Donations poured in from people who had been moved by the founding story. A gas station attendant who gave away his last dollars to help a stranger, and the miracle that followed. Not everyone believed it, of course. There were skeptics who questioned the validity of the Whitmore inheritance, cynics who assumed there had to be some angle. But the paperwork was impeccable, the story verified by multiple sources, and eventually even the doubters had to admit that sometimes improbable things really did happen. Marcus's mother got her house, a modest but comfortable home with a garden where she could grow vegetables and flowers. She cried when she first saw it, running her hands over the walls as though she couldn't quite believe they were real. Marcus had photos taken of her standing on the front porch, her face luminous with joy. And he kept them on his desk at the fund's headquarters. He also made sure to look after his former co-workers at the gas station. One by one he reached out to them, offering opportunities for training, education, whatever they needed to build better lives. Some accepted gratefully, others were too proud or too suspicious. But the offer was always there, standing open like a door to a brighter future. As for Howard Pike, the manager who had spent years belittling and bullying his employees, well, karma has a way of balancing the scales. 6 months after Marcus left, Howard was fired for embezzlement. He'd been skimming money from the register for years, blaming the occasional shortage on his workers. The irony was not lost on anyone. Years passed. Emma grew from a sick little girl into a confident young woman shaped by her father's values and the example of people like Marcus who had demonstrated that kindness could change the world. She went to college on her own merits. She insisted on applying without using the Whitmore name and studied social work, determined to continue the mission her father had started. Daniel remarried eventually to a woman named Claire who worked as a nurse in the same hospital where he'd once mopped floors. They had a small ceremony in a garden surrounded by friends and family and the many people whose lives they had touched. Marcus served as best man, his speech bringing most of the audience to tears. "I met Daniel at the lowest point of his life," Marcus said, looking at his friend. "He was a man with nothing except love for his daughter, and in that moment I saw the truth that so many people forget. Wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in what you're willing to give." Daniel was rich long before the inheritance. He was rich in hope, in perseverance, in the unshakable belief that things could get better. All I did was help him see it. The Kindness Fund celebrated its 10th anniversary with a gala that raised $5 million in a single evening. But Marcus's favorite memory from that night wasn't the speeches or the donations or the celebrity endorsements. It was a quiet moment near the end when a middle-aged woman approached him with tears streaming down her face. "You probably don't remember me," she said. "My name is Angela. 10 years ago my car broke down and I was about to lose my job and you helped me. No questions asked, just helped me." Marcus smiled, feeling the years collapse like an accordion. "I remember you. You had twins in elementary school. How are they doing?" Angela laughed through her tears. "They're in college now, both of them, on scholarships that the fund helped them get." She gripped his hand tightly. "I've spent the last decade trying to pay it forward. Every month I give what I can. And I volunteer at the after-school program you set up, because you were right. Someday I'd be able to help someone else. And that someday has been every day for 10 years. Marcus hugged her, and in that embrace he felt the weight and meaning of everything they had built. One act of kindness, rippling outward infinitely, touching lives they would never know about, changing the world in ways too subtle to measure and too profound to ignore. That night, after the gala ended and the guests had gone home, Marcus found himself standing outside the building that housed the Kindness Fund's headquarters. It was a beautiful building now. They'd renovated it 2 years ago, but in his mind he could still see the run-down apartment where Daniel and Emma had lived, the gas station where it had all begun. Daniel appeared beside him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to Marcus, and they stood together in comfortable silence, looking up at the stars. "Do you ever think about it?" Daniel asked eventually. "That night? The rain? The decision you made?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Sometimes. Usually when I'm helping someone new and I see that look in their eyes, the one you had, that mix of fear and hope and desperation." "You know what I think about," Daniel said. "I think about what would have happened if you'd said no, if you'd just taken my $7 and sent me on my way." He shook his head. "Emma might have—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "But I didn't say no." Marcus turned to face his friend. "And I think that's the whole point. Every day, every moment, we have choices. Small ones, usually. Insignificant seeming, but those choices add up. They create who we are. And sometimes, just sometimes, one small choice can change everything." Daniel nodded. "My father spent his whole life making the wrong choices, choosing money over family, pride over love, control over kindness. And in the end, it brought him nothing but loneliness. But even he found a way to make one right choice at the very end. One right choice that made all of this possible." "Do you forgive him?" Marcus asked quietly. Daniel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, measured. "I forgive him for Emma's sake, for my own peace, for Sarah's memory. Holding on to anger. It's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to get sick. So, yes, I forgive him. But I also remember. I remember what cruelty looks like, so I can recognize it and stand against it. I remember what indifference costs, so I can choose compassion instead." They finished their coffee in the cool night air, 2 men who had started with nothing and built something extraordinary. Not just money or success, but a legacy of kindness that would outlive them both. Marcus thought about his mother, asleep now in her garden house. He thought about Emma, grown and brilliant and carrying the torch forward. He thought about the thousands of people they had helped over the years, each one a story, each one a life changed. And he thought about that rainy night, the decision made in a split second, the $60 that had seemed like such a sacrifice at the time. It had cost him nothing, really. Nothing but the choice to see another human being's pain and decide that it mattered. Nothing but the willingness to give without expecting return. And it had given him everything. The Kindness Fund continues to operate today, though Marcus and Daniel have long since stepped back from day-to-day operations. Emma runs the organization now, with the same fierce compassion that her father showed and the same quiet determination that her mother apparently possessed. There is a portrait in the lobby of the headquarters, Marcus and Daniel standing side by side, with a quote beneath them that has become the fund's official motto. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. They say that every act of kindness sends ripples through the universe, touching shores we cannot see. They say that what you put into the world comes back to you multiplied. They say that no good deed truly goes unrewarded, even if the reward isn't what you expected. Marcus Thompson would say it simpler than that. He would say, there was a man who needed help, and help was given. That's all. That's the whole story. But perhaps that's enough. Perhaps, in the end, that's all any story needs to be. Because sometimes the greatest adventures don't involve dragons or quests or battles against impossible odds. Sometimes the greatest adventure is simply deciding to be kind, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something, even when no one is watching. That night at the gas station, no one was watching. No cameras recorded what Marcus did. No witnesses could testify to his generosity. It was just him, alone with his choice, in a small moment that seemed to matter to no one. But it mattered to Daniel. It mattered to Emma. And through them, it mattered to thousands of others who would never know Marcus's name or hear his story. That's the thing about kindness. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't require recognition or reward. It exists for its own sake, a light that shines simply because that's what light does. And if you're reading this now, wherever you are, whatever struggles you face, know that you too have the power to be that light. You too can change someone's life with a single act, a single choice, a single moment of compassion. You don't need to be rich. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to have anything at all except the willingness to see another person's pain and decide that it matters. Because it does matter. It all matters. Every kindness, every compassion, every moment when we choose love over fear. That's the lesson Daniel learned, standing in the rain with $7 in his pocket. That's the truth Marcus discovered, reaching for his own wallet instead of turning away. And that's the gift they've given to all of us. The reminder that in a world full of darkness, we each carry a light. All we have to do is choose to let it shine. So let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. The rain hammered against the gas station windows like desperate fists, each drop carrying the weight of 1,000 broken dreams. Behind the counter, Marcus Thompson watched the clock tick past 11 p.m., his third double shift this week. The fluorescent lights hummed their tired song, casting pale shadows across his worn sneakers, the same pair he'd bought 2 years ago when life still held the promise of something better. That's when the old pickup truck pulled in,